call your name. Days get long, I call your name. Days get broken, set my spirit free. Oh, Lord, remember me.
Well, welcome again to our Tuesday evening teaching sessions. Thank you so much for joining us. We're arriving at that place where we're coming to the end of the book of Judges. We're going to be going into the last 5 chapters. Hooray, I hear you cry. Well, it has been a tough read and, of course, a tough listen. It's not an easy book. As we said right from the outset, it's very challenging and at times completely confusing. All the way through, it's contained a theme of horror, and you would imagine that towards the end of the book, that might change, that it's like one of those films where everything seems to be bleak and then you end up with a very happy ending. Unfortunately, the book of Judges is not at all like that. In fact, the closing chapters are really quite low-key in one sense. Although they contain the most terrible things, there's a lack of personality about them. We've met some big personalities in the book of Judges, and the author is really moving away from presenting us now with big personalities and just kind of giving us very short little stories. And they're told in a particular narrative form. They are like short stories, and each one seems to stand somewhat in isolation to the other. What is also noticeable is that God is virtually absent from these closing 5 chapters. There is a small reference to God in chapter 20, but generally, you get that sense of abandonment, that God somehow has moved away. He's almost left everyone to their own devices. And that is a challenge for us, that what we see here in these stories is that things have reached almost their lowest point. And we will see that next week, particularly. And that there's that sense of lostness and darkness. These are dark, dark days. So I'm going to invite my friend David Suchet to read chapter 17 and 18 for us.
Judges chapter 17. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith who used them to make the idol, and it was put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some other place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said, "and I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me, and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." Judges chapter 18. In those days Israel had no king. And in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, "Go, explore the land." So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they turned in there and asked him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" He told them what Micah had done for him, and said, "He has hired me, and I am his priest." Then they said to him, "Please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful." The priest answered them, "Go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval." So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety, like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, "How did you find things?" They answered, "Come on, let's attack them. We have seen the land, and it is very good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. When you get there, you'll find an unsuspecting people and a spacious land that God has put into your hands, a land that lacks nothing whatever." Then 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. On their way they set up camp near Kiriath-Jearim in Judah. This is why the place west of Kiriath-Jearim is called Manahath-Dan to this day. From there they went on to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. Then the 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, "Do you know that one of these houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do." So they turned in there and went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" They answered him, "Be quiet, don't say a word. Come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and clan in Israel as priest, rather than just one man's household?" The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idol, and went along with the people. Putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them, they turned away and left. When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. As they shouted after them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you that you called out your men to fight?" He replied, "You took the gods I made, and my priest, and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask, 'What's the matter with you?'" The Danites answered, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you, and your family will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned round and went back home. Then they took what Micah had made, and his priest, and went on to Laish against a people at peace and secure. They attacked them with the sword and burned down their city. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anyone else. The city was in a valley near Beth Rehob. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan, after their ancestor Dan, who was born to Israel, though the city used to be called Laish. There the Danites set up for themselves the idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the land. They continued to use the idol Micah had made, all the time the house of God was in Shiloh.
I think the author is keen to tell us that religion is still alive, but in practice, it's disconnected from God, the God of Israel, Yahweh. It's mixed up. I'm tempted to use that term, but when I think about it, probably disconnected is a much better term. Religion has become disconnected from a true faith and a true belief in the God of covenant promises, the God of heaven and earth. If you look carefully, you'll see that all the religious paraphernalia is in place. Everything on the surface seems to be okay, but the heart of faith has completely gone. You'll notice as we come into chapters 17 and 18 that there's a list of religious requirements drawn up by one of the key characters, a man called Micah.
And he seems to be very aware that these are the very fabric, the very items that are necessary to recreate a shrine or a temple or whatever. But again, you'll see how mixed up and how devoid of true faith and true spirituality things have actually come to. So the author introduces us in chapter 17 to Micah and his mother. And in a very short space, a few verses, he wants us to tell us that things are going increasingly wrong. Here we have a situation where a son has stolen silver, the family treasure, from his own mother. And it's only when he realizes that his mother has issued a curse over the person who has stolen the silver that he actually begins to panic. And as we find in the story, very quickly he realizes that he better return it. He make amends with his mother. In turn, his mother surprises us. She seems very appeased and very forgiving, and she blesses the potentially cursed son, Micah. To celebrate and to give thanks for the return of the silver, Micah's mother arranges for it to be melted down and made into an idol, a replica. And what we see here is her wording is really interesting, because she says, I'm going to make a thanksgiving offering to the Lord. Well, of course, for us, reading the story, we assume that means Yahweh. But of course, what she does in having the idol made is that she flies in the face of the second commandment. But you notice that they seem oblivious to it all. It's almost as if simply they believe that all of this is okay, it's the right thing to do. I think the author wants us to see that the journey downwards, that spiraling downwards, has brought about a complete disconnect from the religious past of the people of Israel. They even seem now in that place where they're not just disobedient, but they're totally unaware that all of this might be a real problem. So Micah sets about building this shrine. We don't know what it was made of. We're not given any particular details. And then he seems connected enough with the past, the religious life of Israel in the past, to draw up a list of requirements. These are the things I'm going to need in my shrine to give it authenticity. An ephod, well, in the past we've seen that was like something that the priest wore, a little bit like a priestly garment, but it appears here that this was some kind of plated silver ornament and not a garment. And of course, then he appoints a priest. You have to have a priest in a religious shrine. And it's one of his sons. And it doesn't seem to matter to him that it is. So the shrine is set up, the idol and the image is created, the paraphernalia of religious observance is included. And then, of course, the story gets even brighter as far as Micah is concerned. Because a true priest from the line of Aaron suddenly turns up. We're told later his name is Jonathan. Seemingly then, the very grandson of Moses. This is getting better for Micah. The priest needs a job. Micah needs a priest. And of course, the deal is struck. At no point, note, does this grandson of Moses, this priest of the line of Aaron, this Levite, see that there's any problem with the shrine. All it seems to be to him is a job, a home, some food, an income, and he seems totally at home with that. And of course, what the author is trying to point out to us is that the priestly line has also become corrupted. They now are so disconnected from the worship of the true God of Israel, they don't even seem to be aware that there ever was a connection, that there's any problem here. Micah himself is, of course, beside himself with joy, and he now believes that everything is right and in place, and this will mean that he's guaranteed a blessed life. And yet, we see here the stupidity of Micah being presented almost in a comical way. You almost feel you want to laugh at his self-satisfaction and the way he goes about things. And of course, when this story was brought to being edited and written down, that was probably around the time of the second exile or post-exile. The southerners in Jerusalem, because of course Micah was a northerner, well, they would have really enjoyed reading it, because here was a bit of a Mickey take of someone from the north. So you can see the humor and almost the Mickey take that's taken place. It's also interesting to note that the name Micah in Hebrew actually is translated as who is like Yahweh. Well, that's a really good question. Who is like Yahweh? And where is Yahweh in all of this? Chapter 18 introduces us to the tribe of Dan. Their proposed migration into a more southern settlement, as we see it in chapter 18, is not unusual in itself. The tribal settlement process was still very fluid, and there was no fixed settlement. The tribes were still moving around, still trying to find the best location, the most prosperous location, where fertility was high, and where they could settle with a reasonable sense of wealth and well-being. So there's all this movement still going on. But here we see Dan, particularly this tribe, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, migrating towards the south to somewhere that they perceive to be better for them. And the process that they go about is really interesting, because I think what the author is saying is they're going about the same process that the first settlers did when they came out of Exodus and into the promised land, the land of Canaan. Because note how they too send out 5 spies who are to go and to report on the state of the land and the power or weakness of the people who live there. It's very parallel to the way that the 2 spies were sent in the first wave of settlement into Canaan. The 5 spies go, they see both the prosperity and the weakness of the people there, and they come back and they issue the command or the directive, let's go up against them. Well, of course, that's so reminiscent of the way the 2 spies did just the same during that first wave of settlement. The process is the same, the author wants to tell us. But what is different is it's lost its spiritual heart and direction. It's become completely disconnected from God, the God of covenant, the God of commitment and relationship, Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is playing no part in this, not even being referred to. In chapter 18, we see that once more Micah and his shrine take a center place. The 600 soldiers that have been sent out from amongst the tribe of Dan, although we're assuming probably that the whole tribe was on the move with them too, well, they turn up at the shrine of Micah and they take away all the trappings it contained. What is humorous is also they take the priests with them. Jonathan seems to be quite happy to go with them. They're a higher bidder. They've got the best offer. Why be a priest to one family when you can be a priest to a whole tribe? It's tempting for Jonathan. And of course, off he goes. Micah re-enters the situation and realizes what has happened. And he tries to catch up with the tribe and the soldiers, these 600 soldiers of Dan. But of course, he's massively outnumbered. And so he has to go back to his home. The thief that we met in chapter 17, the one who stole from his mother, has now become the one who has robbed. And the author wants us to catch on to that. The tribe of Dan, we're told, secures its new possession. And then in chapter 17 and verse 16, if we can refer back to that, we see the reoccurring theme, words that we're going to meet time and time again in these last 5 chapters. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they thought fit. There was no human king to lead the people. But also, there seems to be no divine king to lead the people. There is no monarchy and there is no theocracy. These were indeed dark, dark days.
Chains get broken, set my body free. Oh, Lord, remember me, remember me. His journey